I was still young enough where he just viewed me as a kid all the time. And up until the day I left, and I was 40-something years old when I left, he still viewed me as that kid who started there at 20. I did never, in his mind, ever graduate from that. Which is, look, that's how sometimes that happens a lot of times. I still think of my little nephews my little cousins and stuff as little kids, and they're grown-ups. And and that happens. And I really think at the end of the day, he always, no matter what responsibility I had or what job I did or where I landed in that, I think he still thought I was, this 20-year-old kid who was his intern.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, because I was just, as I was thinking about this interview, it's like, well, you were there a long time, and you were one of the, I mean, you think of Gary and Fred and Robin, and then I go Stuttering John, Casey. Well, they went, Artie left, and you were there from start, from what I remember, and it's like, so where was this, where's this relationship? But the kid thing makes sense. If Grillo would have stayed on, it would have probably been the same thing. Grillo's just a potato head or whatever. Exactly.
It's an interesting scenario when you're kind of caught in that, right? It's like you want to do more and you want to kind of graduate to the next steps, but he's never really going to see you as that. He'd be more apt to see somebody from the outside who was coming in as an executive producer than somebody who was homegrown into an executive producer, in a sense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even Gary, part of the reason Gary still gets shit to this day is, because he still thinks of Gary as Boy Gary, so that's really, what his mindset is.
No, that's a really good analogy. I mean, Gary's 60 now, and he's still Baba Boo.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got kids that are bigger than Howard,
Yeah. And and the other thing is we're all there to be, comic foils to him. We're little props that he can go to when he needs to do something funny, and look, as part of being the show, you kind of get that to a degree. And you realize what your role is, right? And you realize that that's part of, appearing on this kind of show is that, we're all here. I mean, it's a comedy show at the end of the day. So we all have good senses of humor, and we all feel like, we're all in on the joke. But we're really there to be his, comic foil.
Yeah, and I, again, became a fan of this show, I think, in the mid-'90s. The Channel 9 show was shown here the Channel 9 show showed at 3 in the morning here in St. Louis on Channel 11, and this is back when you had to record things on VCR, and my brother and I were like, what? We knew of him, from the Letterman, but the fact that he had this show, and he was, the playing his own tapes, and everything was just so crazy about this show.
That was a great show. I actually was lucky enough to, I would go, they would tape on, I think they taped on Friday nights from what I remember. So I would sometimes get to go and watch the taping. Luckily I think I appeared on one episode or two episodes, just kind of in the background or something. But yeah, that was an incredible show. It really was. It really sad that it kind of never really got its full due, and also sad that it never really saw the light of day until people started ripping it and putting it on YouTube now,
Well, and that's the thing. It was it was just sort of grungy, and like I said, he would stop the tape in the middle, and you could see the stopping of the tape, and you could hear Jackie laughing in the background, and just the set was, and I liked that it was sort of localized. I don't know, but I became a fan, and that's when I knew of you because of these classic moments. So I mentioned this tape. I think that's the big first thing that happened to you, right? Tell me a little bit about, so what, you were supposed to tape something?
There were many, many big things that happened before that. That wasn't necessarily the biggest thing.
But it was memorable, maybe?
Is this probably one of the most memorable because he also put it in the book. He retold that story in the book.
And would you
I think that really, at the end of the day, kind of cemented that story.
In case people don't know what we're talking about.
So the story was, which version do you want? Do you want the version that he told on the air? Do you want the version that he told on the air, or do you want the truth? Because they're not the same.
Go both.
But I'll tell you his story. So his story was, he had his daughter's teacher was dying in the hospital, and all she ever wanted was to watch Seinfeld to help cheer her up. And this is, pre-DVD days when you couldn't just buy DVDs or download or stream. and Ralph owned like a VHS compilation that was like taped off of the air of every Seinfeld episode. And, you know, he asked me to make a copy of it, and they were going to send it to the teacher in the hospital to cheer her up. And lo and behold, she goes to put this tape in, and it's a porn tape. It's, you know, it's a enema tape or whatever. I forget, a Japanese enema tape or whatever he referred to it as. And, you know, obviously he was very embarrassed, and it was a whole big thing, and he had usually apologized and blah, 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 blah. You know, so that's the legendary story of the Seinfeld tape.
Oh, that's just to hear you set it up and tell it. It's really,
yeah.
To hear it from the person that, how did that happen? So you're blaming Ralph? Are we blaming Ralph?
No, here's exactly what the story, here's how it happened, you know, in a play-by-play. I was handed both tapes towards the end of the day, and you got to remember, this was like a 6-hour VHS dub. So it was one of those things that I would set up to record before I left for the night. And the next morning you'd come in and you'd deal with it then, because to sit around, I wasn't going to run a dub for 6 hours because I wasn't there that long. So I set up a dub. I was handed both tapes. I was handed the Seinfeld tape and the supposed blank tape. Now, the supposed blank tape is dub stock. So why, if this was so important, would somebody give me dub stock of a porn, right? You'd make it a brand new tape so you wouldn't have any issues. So my bad was that I forgot, and you're a little bit older, so maybe you'd remember this. You used to have to put, because the tab was pulled. So you used to have to put a piece of tape over that tab so it would record. So my bad was I don't think I ever either put the tape on it or I never really hit the record button properly that the record started. But I think it was more the tape, because I remember seeing the tape playing and assuming that it was dubbing. So the next morning, I get a call from Howard's assistant asking if the dub is done. And I was at the show at that time. I didn't get back to his office until mid-afternoon. And I was like, I assume so. I set it to record. And she's like, okay, great. So she popped it out and then mailed it out. So there was no opportunity for me to check the work because I wasn't there to see that it didn't record. So really, I had a portion of that, but it wasn't all on me. So that's the story. It's not as funny when you're listening to it that way than when it's all my fault and I screwed up.
There is a reason why he's the king of all media. He did tell that story much better than
yeah, exactly. Like when you look at the truth isn't as funny as the version that's super embellished.
It's still great. Still a great story. So we talked about the original E! Show where he was doing those interviews, and then he comes in and they put the cameras in. So this is where you kind of get a break, right? Like you start running. Yeah. Is it basically, was your job to run the camera and get the interviews, or what all you doing?
Yeah. So it was I was really a production assistant on the show. That was like my title. But part of that was, we wanted to capture all the behind the scenes hijinks and, to kind of work it into the show. So obviously they weren't going to hire a cameraman. I'm there. We had this high 8 camera, and I would just kind of lurk around and, tape anything interesting that was kind of going on. But part of that was, and it kind of worked into this, because our executive producer at the time would kind of start doing this a little bit, where we'd get a pre-interview from the guest about what they were kind of expecting for the day. And then we kind of get like this post-interview about how the interview went, which came the famous thing, like how'd it go in there.
Were you happy or sad?
Yeah. Listen, I was 22 years old. I mean, I wasn't like really experienced in interviewing people, and some of the guests made me nervous, of course. When you'd be sitting there waiting for like Roseanne to come out, and she starts yelling at you the second you start asking a question, you kind of get nervous at 22. Yeah. These were big celebrities, and I was a kid. So part of that was doing these pre-interviews and post-interviews where it was my job to really just ask all these stupid questions, which weren't even like, Howard was always like, oh, you're not original, you don't ask original questions. But at the end of the day, who are you going to listen to do original questions to? Me or Howard, right? This was just a quick post reaction of their interview. It wasn't meant to be like funny. It wasn't meant to be. I mean, Howard's the star, and he's asking all the questions. This was just literally a how to go in there kind of. All that would get in the show was like that 10, 15 seconds at the end. So it wasn't like there was like, I could, do a whole long interview with them.
Who was your favorite celebrity? There are three favorite celebrities that you asked. How did it
Well, all right. I mean, there's favorite celebrities. It's kind of a hard one. I mean, there were so many. Most of them, I would say 95% were really great. Happy to be there. Like really just kind of like enjoyed. I mean, I would always say from the time period, Pam Anderson was number one. Just, at the time she was just, our Marilyn Monroe or whatever, and just every time she would come in, just the feeling in the hallway would just be like, so electric with just her being around. Like some of the bands that were always there. I mean, I was a huge, I still am a huge music lover. Matter of fact, big props, Eddie Van Halen. When Van Halen came on, that was awesome. David Lee Roth. Matter of fact, there was always, the show had a very strict edict about not getting autographs. You couldn't, if as somebody who worked there, you would never want to ask, a guest for an autograph. It's kind of improper. It kind of puts them on the spot. But the one and only guest that I ever got an autograph from, which went through the chain, I asked Gary, and I guess Gary might have cleared it with Howard or whoever, but was David Lee Roth. And I guess his manager had gotten me a signed, 8x10, like that was really, so those kind of guests were always like my favorite. I mean, outside of like, Beetlejuice, he's still the overall number one, because him walking around the halls was the most entertaining thing you can ever imagine.
I was gonna say, is he the number one whack packer? Is he
100%,
the king of whack?
100%.
Yeah, right. I mean,
there's nobody. At the time, maybe Hank the Angry Drunken Dwarf was up there, but Beetlejuice is the king. He's the ruler of that whack pack world.
I mean, and you get to see this like we talked about, when you got there, he's in 3 cities, then he gets to 20, then 50, then he's going to Sirius. I know we're kind of fast forwarding real fast, but I mean, what was that, just being around that, like seeing it, and did you enjoy it more when it was a little more condensed and more kind of family, right?
Well, yeah, it was definitely. It's kind of a hard answer. There was 2 separate versions, right? The Sirius show was kind of different, but it was still great because it was this whole new world, and everybody was excited and had all these like great things about all these possible things we can do. The organization was kind of getting bigger, so we can kind of do some more. But yeah, those early days were just really like so much more fun. It was, like you got to remember, I was there for all 3. When we started, we were in New York, Washington, and Philly, right? Huge markets. I was there for all of those funerals, the John DeBella funerals and all of those things. Then we went to Los Angeles, and that was huge. Then I was there for, the e-shows, the books, and then the movie, him shooting the movie. All like super crazy times, just unbelievable experience to kind of be there through that rise and really see, like where we started or where I started on the show to where we finally ended up.
Do you have any favorite stories from that little period? Did you go to the movie set at all? Did you get to be part of that at all? Or
I went to the movie set to, we were doing for Howard's E! Show, we were doing behind the scenes of the movie special. So we shot a lot of the behind the scenes of the movie. So I got to go on a couple like sets that were like local. Some of them were like far into Queens or outside of, like the New York City region. So any of the ones in the New York City region, I was able to go to. So the big famous one is the scene in Bryant Park where they kind of hold a rally. So I was there, shooting for the E! Show, not myself, but we had a camera crew and we were shooting that. So somewhere in that mass of people is me and a camera crew,
Well, I'll look for you. Let's see if we can circle you.
Wait, hold on. Hold on. You froze for a second. Sorry.
You froze, but I heard you, so it was okay.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I think
all right,
good. We were talking about the eras because, like, in my head, I think he showed up in St. Louis around '98, but I had already seen these shows, so I was trying to follow him however I could. But it's the Jackie era, the Artie era, and then the after Artie era. Do you have a favorite between Jackie and Artie eras?
No, I mean they were both totally different, right? So the Jackie era was just, I mean, it was more, it was just because it was a smaller crew. And Jackie was more of a writer. He wasn't necessarily like, he was a personality on the show, but that wasn't his primary job. His primary job was to be a writer. I can't say that I like one over the other. I mean, I loved and love Artie. He was one of the funniest parts of the show for the many years that he was there. There was nothing that dude wouldn't say or do, and that's why you love him. And I don't think I could say which one I like better. They're both equal to me.
I love Jackie.
And both different.
Yes.
Both different.
I love the Artie era, I have to say. I just remember when people talk about sitting in their cars waiting for a commercial, I literally was doing that a few times at work because I couldn't wait to hear. He was so funny. I always ask my guests, do you talk to Artie? Do we know where he is? How is he doing? Do you keep in touch with him?
I haven't I saw him in February, I think, right before this COVID lockdown started. So I haven't seen him since or heard from him since. So I don't know how he's doing. But, I mean, I saw him perform one night, and it was great, and I got to see him for a couple of minutes. He was trying to, like, get out of there really quick. I think he just, he no longer, like, hangs around and does that. So the minute the show was over, he was, like, hitting the road. So I got to see him for, like, 2 minutes and tell him I loved him and, give him a big hug, and that was really it. So I haven't seen him, but that was, like, literally February before COVID started.
Did you go on any shoots during his Artie days where he was selling out shows and being kind of a rock and roll star?
Yeah, we did a big shoot in Vegas that we called Artie's Party, and Artie had just sold out 2 nights at the Joint in the Hard Rock, so we wanted to kind of go and tape a little of that, but we knew Artie was going to be out there, so we were like, why don't we make this like pool party special where Artie would kind of like host something at the pool, and I think it wound up being like, obviously like some sort of like bikini contest kind of thing at the Hard Rock pool, and Artie and Ronnie hosted it. So it was a fun time. I mean, just, Artie's crazy. I mean, it was always fun to be around him and those kind of things. And Vegas is his element. And I remember, like, this is how cool Artie is, and just, in general, and why I love him and I'll always love him. And it's not all about the money, but, like while we were there, we were all out, to do this thing. And Artie had sold out these 2 nights at the Joint, and he was really like happy in a good mood. And we all went out to dinner at Nobu, and there was probably, I don't know, 15 of us, maybe 20. And Artie paid for everything for the crew and for everybody. Just, it was probably a, $15,000 or $20,000 dinner, and that's how awesome Artie is.
Won a bet, paid for dinner, lost the bet the next night, but.
Oh yeah, 100%. He probably blew, I don't know how much he made that weekend, but he probably blew all that money. He probably left like in the red.
I was talking, so Brian Phelan, a coworker of yours, was nice enough